to CBS News 24/7. On to the Middle East now. Hamas confirms the death of its leader, Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October 7th attack in Israel. Hamas now says it will not free the hostages until there is a ceasefire and withdrawal from Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the takedown of Sinwar the, quote, beginning of the end. Sinwar is among at least 5 top Hamas and Hezbollah leaders killed since the war started. So CBS News reporter Haley Ott joining us live from Tel Aviv now to talk more about all of this. Global leaders around the world there, including the U.S., do in fact see this opportunity as a ceasefire. But where do negotiations stand today?
Yes, as you say, there are people that are hopeful this is an opportunity for a ceasefire, but those negotiations that you mentioned really ground to a halt over the summer. In August, pretty much all the parties at the table walked away, and that was because each side started accusing one another of either moving the goalposts or not really being willing to make a deal in the end. But now we have a change in a dynamic, and that is making the international community hopeful. President Biden is sending Antony Blinken to the region to talk about security in Gaza maybe after the war. But the signaling that we're getting from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that Sinwar's death, the killing of Sinwar, doesn't mean that this war is over, though it is his aim to get the hostages back home. And the signaling we're getting from Hamas, who in their official statement today spoke about sort of the continued existence of the group. Senior Hamas officials said that the group isn't really dependent on one leader. So it is very much up in the air at this point, and it remains to be seen what will happen in terms of a ceasefire negotiation.
Absolutely. So the next question is, there have been reports about who could end up leading Hamas next. Are you hearing anything on that front?
Yes, there have been a number of rumors. There have been names that have been sort of put out there. But when we ask Hamas officials, what we get back is a big, I don't know. A lot of what appears to be the case at this point is people are scrambling. They're trying to decide what to do next. Communications aren't great between people on the ground in Gaza. So we at this point just really have no visibility into what the next steps will be in terms of leadership of Hamas.
All right, Haley Ott from Tel Aviv. Haley, thank you for that update there. Meanwhile, President Biden just left Germany, where he met with foreign leaders about the conflicts brewing in the Middle East. He did take a moment to speak to reporters on the tarmac, saying the road to peace in the region is going to be difficult. Take a listen.
Can you give us a sense about the Middle East peace? You said it's going to be harder. Do you have any sense of a timeline? Are you putting more pressure on Netanyahu?
It was an opportunity, in my view, and my colleagues agree, that you should probably deal with Israel and Iran in a way that ends the conflict for a while.
Say that again?
It ends the conflict. In other words, it stops the back and forth. We think that there's a possibility of working to a ceasefire in Lebanon, and it's going to be harder in Gaza, but we agree that there has to be an outcome. What happened the day after?
Do you have a good understanding right now what Israel is going to do in response to Iran's October 1st attacks, and when they will actually respond to Iran?
Yes and yes.
Can you tell us?
No.
Sir, did you hear any concerns about the upcoming American election? Are your fellow leaders worried?
They're heavy.
Did you get reassurance from Netanyahu yesterday on your phone calls that no willing to come to the table on his ceasefire?
Well, I'm not going. We're in the middle of discussions on that. I'm not going to be doing that.
But suppose if there any chance that you would, on Ukraine, that you would change your mind on long-range weapons, allowing them to strike deeper into Russia, which is one of the main proposals that Zelensky put out.
I mean, foreign policy, there's never I never changed my mind. Right now, there's no consensus for long-range weapons.
What would have to happen for you to change your mind on that?
I'm not going to speculate.
What's the consensus on the Ukraine victory?
All right, let's get to CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. He's joining us live now from Berlin. So, Willie, President Biden says that all of the leaders are technically on the same page. What else did we get from this meeting?
Hey there, Julia. Good to be with you from Berlin. Well, President Biden met with the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany to discuss a range of issues, as he talked about there on the tarmac before he departed back for the United States. And one of those sticking points, they might be on the same page when it comes to you further supporting Ukraine, but they still have to get through the red tape, so to speak, to get Ukraine this $50 billion loan that's backed by seized Russian assets. There's a lot of red tape that the Europeans and everyone involved wants to make sure that they cross off before they get that money to them. But the goal is to get them that money by the end of the year. Now, the president also taking questions on the Middle East. He said previously that this essentially is an opening with the death of Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. This is an opening for peace and to bring the hostages back home. Now, we heard from John Kirby, the NSC spokesperson, earlier today, and he essentially said that just because Sinwar is dead, it doesn't necessarily mean that negotiations will start and pop right back up tomorrow. But that is an ongoing conversation that the president and other world leaders will, of course, have in the coming days as we assess the response from that response, what will be from Israel and Hamas. Juliet.
Yeah, and Willie, this obviously being the president's last trip, essentially there as president of the United States. So what else came out of the meetings that was notable?
Yeah, it was an interesting and perhaps an emotional trip for President Biden. He is someone who has been really in the trenches when it comes to foreign policy, both as vice president serving under President Obama, but before that as a U.S. senator on the Foreign Relations Committee. And one of the things that happened today was that the president, he received the Order of the Merit Award here in Germany, the highest civilian honor in this country. The last U.S. president, and only U.S. president to receive this award before President Biden, was George H.W. Bush in the early 1990s. So a significant moment there. And the reason why the Germans decided to give President Biden this award is because his support of the transatlantic partnership between Germany and the Europeans. And the president of Germany noted as much, that essentially when President Biden was elected, that ability to maintain those alliances really just got stronger overnight. Perhaps a dig at former President Donald Trump. That is certainly something that's on the minds of European leaders here, most notably the Germans. Germany is number 2 when it comes to that support for Ukraine. They want to see that continue, but it's an open question as to whether or not that will continue to happen if former President Donald Trump becomes president of the United States. Juliet.
Willie James Inman joining us live from Berlin. Thank you so much.